Given how I've shared my feelings surrounding Mafia 2, saying it is one of the few games that have actually stuck with me, when I heard rumors that it was getting a sequel, I was more than just hyped. I can't put into words how I actually felt and all that I expected from it. A next generation conceptualized game that could add on the features that made Mafia 2 work, use the formula and expand on it, make the world feel even more alive, tell another concise Italian mafia story featuring a city that you could actually get lost in, another recreation of the past with an original atmosphere, another glimpse into that which is lost. It was hinted at a certain point that the game was actually set in the 1960s in a fictive rendition of New Orleans, and that you were in fact not taking part in an Italian mafia story. Weird, I thought, although that wasn't a deal breaker. I fantasized as to what the game would look like, so I based my thoughts around building upon the Mafia 2 formula, what worked and that I'd like to be seen reintegrated and what could be built upon. I also fantasized about the feel the game could have, and I imagined myself cruising around in a vintage Cadillac in 1960s New Orleans listening to Slip Away by Clarence Carter or perhaps Born to be Wild while escaping from the police in this large car chase. It seemed like something to top even GTA 5 and create perhaps the greatest city sandbox ever, with the perfect setting. And then came the gameplay.
New Bordeaux, a modern city with traditional Southern values.
I underestimated how far he was going to go. What he was willing to do.
Visit the historic French Ward and enjoy local cuisine at one of our 5-star restaurants.
Killing them wasn't enough. Lincoln Clay was using them to send a message.
Or spend the afternoon in the bayou and take in its natural splendor.
What then hit me as I saw certain gameplay clips by Hangar 13, the dev team that were to overtake the franchise, was that the game wasn't like what I expected at all. After watching the devs explaining how the game were to be perceived, I sensed a basic foundation. Also, the fact of how vague the creative director of the game was when describing the game and the story made me cringe. So let's fast forward to October of 2016 when the developers of the game Hangar 13 released the launch trailer for the game featuring an Ice Cube song showing what the game was all about. It seemed out of that trailer that the game in itself wasn't like Mafia 2 at the slightest and was targeted towards being this undefined open world sandbox, seemingly having no nuanced nostalgic factor. The trailer was one of the worst trailers I'd ever seen, and to be frank, largely due to how the game in itself is also one of the worst games I've ever played.
What would I give?
In this video, I'm not going to fantasize about completely overhauling the game, my ideal Mafia 3 and what I would have liked it to be. That can be for another video. In fact, I'm going to, just like I did in my AC Odyssey video, work with the format already given to the game and stick with the patterns featured and argue how they could fully come into fruition. To get started, let's define what the game actually is. From there on to come with a good concept which fits in line with the game engine, which sucks, and try to make the formula work better. This means looking away from the terrible facade of the open world. Just lower our standards. From there on to try to make it the most enjoyable. Because the game has the potential of actually being enjoyable, despite being a terrible sequel. So the formula that Hangar 13 decided to apply to Mafia 3 is this open world based game loop continuation. Doing the same type of quests again and again until you're done with one area of the city, for there on to partake in one stylized mission, for then to repeat the cycle in another. On top of this, you have yourself a crew, and you get to choose who you want ruling parts of the city, which then causes outrage from those who don't get chosen, etc, etc. So summed up, the game is an open world side mission based shooting game. Firstly, I'd like the game to double down on the features that in themselves make the game good. When I played the game, I almost enjoyed it. I enjoyed the brainless fun, driving to different locations, listening to the radio, listening to the Beach Boys, for example, while getting ready to shoot enemies and completing certain objectives. The missions, however, They were identical to one another, but the driving from location to location never got old. However, what I envisioned for the game was immersion, being, as I talked about in my Mafia 2 video, being in the past. The open world is built as though you're only meant to drive, not to walk around and take in the fresh breeze and breathe in a rendition of New Orleans in 1968. However, immersing yourself into the city isn't a feature. Why can't I, like in Mafia 2, visit diners from time to time, order a beer, a sandwich, or a bottle of Coca-Cola? Just have an ability to go off script, walk around and take in the atmosphere of the 60s. As of now, walking around in New Bordeaux feels like taking a stroll in North Korea. There is nowhere to go, no one to interact with, and when you scratch the surface, everything falls apart. And to add on top of that is the AI, which is broken. For example, you can only hear one person speak at a time. When you're in a crowded room and speaking just gets ping-ponged around the room, if you sit down in a restaurant, for example, the conversations that you can listen to are so basic, making even the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion's Radiant system feel godly. This is just a shame and such a downgrade from Mafia 2. So let's talk about the feature that would make the game much better. That which is truly essential in creating a fun GTA-style sandbox. One of the game features that I like the most in GTA and in Mafia 2 and to a certain degree in Watch Dogs is getting chased by the police. I envision had the world space and AI of the game been good. Listening to great 60s rock hits while getting chased by the police trying to lose them would be highly enjoyable. However, this isn't possible in that the police AI is terrible. You can pretty much just do whatever you want and nothing happens. As a matter of fact, when pedestrians notice that you have done something illegal, well, something brutal, then they say out loud, "Oh shit, I have to call the police." Then you have like half a minute to stop them from calling the said police. And why this is a feature, I have no idea. In that getting chased by the police is in itself thrilling and a great feature. However, I said I was going to expand on the formula and look away from the bad AI and focus on what it does right and base this video around making these few features actually work. So let's talk about the game and what it is, what the devs tried to manifest. A shooter sandbox. So when I played the game, I chose to direct my focus towards what the game did well. I looked away from the grimming fact that this is the sequel to my favorite city sandbox, and I chose to invest on the guerrilla combat. I took part in a sandbox of causing brainless havoc, shooting without thinking. So yes, I took part in the sandbox and chose different outfits, for example a trench coat or a typical Black Panther outfit, and I let my imagination run free, just ignoring all that is bad about the game and focused on the few good parts. This almost drew me in what was left as a cool little sandbox featuring amazing sounding looking cars and great music and good enough visuals. However, the game failed to make this dream come into fruition based on all the pre-rendered cutscenes not reflecting my outfits. I remember this made me angry. I yelled out pretty much, "Can't this game be good at being bad even?" Yes, this was actually a major deal for me and drew me out of character. So yes, the game could have worked with this narrow vision. So let's expand on what the game could have done right. The set pieces. So yes, the game had been better had the cutscenes reflected your outfits. Okay, you might not think this is that big of a deal. So let's criticize the set pieces even more. What could have made the game be good at being bad? And this is something that just shouldn't happen and drew me out of the game. Just look at how this clip is directed. The fact that this is present baffles me. I mean, WTF?
Should have saved a bullet or two.
Moments like these draw me out of the game. Lincoln had a 99.9% chance of dying right there. I mean, why did he approach him like that? Who was in charge of creating that cutscene? This is something that isn't linked to the engine at all, and just should not be present. It seems as though this clip was directed by a child who has this simple grasp of mathematics and realism. Me as an amateur could have made this set piece a million times better. And not only this one, the game is filled with errors. What I am asking for is perhaps one cool cutscene where, for example, Cream's White Room is playing, while you approach an antagonist. You can't go wrong with that. What the game fails to deliver on, not just as a Mafia game, but as a game in general, is the lack of a direct vision. How the game doesn't capture the atmosphere of the past, lacking the small aspects that make the game world feel whole and alive, and it also fails at being a shooter sandbox. What could have been a great game with a perfect setting and soundtrack is left as a horrible Mafia game and a mediocre game in general.